Okay, hello everybody, nice to meet you. I hope you had a good meeting so far and you learned some nice things. My name is Dominik, I'm from brain-tec, so we're a partner since many years. We're based in Switzerland, and this short presentation I want to show you how to use Odoo with external data sources, so such as Dynamics Nav, or actually you can use it for any other kind of ODBC data sources. So because in the end we're using ODBC as main interface. So presentation is based or set up like that. Why is there a need for connectors? Because Odoo does everything very well. It's a very well integrated system, so actually there's no need for other software. Then I will give you a quick demonstration, live demonstration, really with a running Navision instance and a running Odoo instance, and like a closing part. So what's the result out of it all? Actually, why did we do it? So the need of connectors is actually quite easy explained. If you have bigger company environments and you're integrating Odoo into an existing environment, it might be that you need to get data out of other leading systems. So that means, for instance, if inside the Navision, the HR management is done because that company does since many years HR management with Navision, then they maybe don't want to migrate in the first step fully, so they do it maybe partially. So due to that, you need to have the data, and you just don't need to have them once imported, you need to have them every time live updated. You need to get them in the system so that you can continue working with it. Or inside bigger production companies, if you have sale or work orders which work together with SAP, for instance, so with really productive factories where you do have external things and other databases, you might need to, for instance, create things inside Odoo to have a proper process and so on. So that's actually the need for those connectors. How do we get the data? There are like two possibilities. You can get them just in time, so get them really as soon as the record has been created or changed or updated, or you can get them scheduled. I just will show you scheduled and manual import here, because to trigger just in time is a little bit trickier, but that's possible as well. Furthermore, what could be done, but what I will not show you, is you can do it as well vice versa. Maybe Odoo is the leading system and you have a following system and you need to trigger information inside the following system. So due to that, you can use this connector as well to write inside other data sources. I will tell you something regarding that later in the speech. So what are the known issues with those connectors globally, or with the existing connectors we found in the market? We know that there's an OCA connector. Odoo provides a very good default import-export functionality. But all those connectors or importers and so on, they had for us some problems. So for instance, a more or less static mapping of data. So you have one external data source and the data might not be in the right format, for instance. So you need to transform them somehow, you need to modify the data. Maybe you need to export it out in Excel, write some wrapper functions or somehow modify them, or you need to have a developer who will write those wrapper functions on the object and so on. So that's every time a little bit tricky. Date formats might be in a different format. It could be that you do have some value stored in the database because the other database has another logic, and that logic means, for instance, if a date is not set, I will set a date from 1700. So that's actually Dynamics logic. So as soon as the date is undefined, it has a date from 1700. When you import it in Odoo, you run into problems because the end date cannot be before the start date. So there are constraints in the database and so on. So all those things you need to know when you import data. You need to have like a deeper knowledge of all those points. And furthermore, when you import a main object, you need to have as well child objects properly created. And child objects could be, for instance, when we stick to the example with the employee, the job position. So you want to store the employee and the job position. And additionally to that, you want to create the address of the employee. So there are already 3 objects inside Odoo, but maybe it's just one table in Navision. So how do we create it? Do we have to create like 3 imports and run them in a sequence? Or don't we have to do it and we do it just once on the fly? So the goal was for us to have really just one main point where we trigger, and then all the child will be fetched just on the fly. We couldn't find a good solution for that on the fly. The Odoo import has this option as well to import the child on the fly, so it's quite good done. But the other problems were not solved with the importer. So actually, all those problems I showed on the previous page were exactly those problems we had. And so we figured out what solutions are there. We checked out several, but in the end, we developed our own. So I will show you right now how it's working very, very easily. So I will leave the presentation. And let's go to another desktop. And I will show you briefly how it does look in Odoo. So we created an SQL connector, it's called. And first of all, you need to specify the data source. So where does the data come from? I have another virtual machine running. So that's the local server address I defined. And actually, the server needs to be available by IP so that you have a HTTPS connection to the server itself. And you need to create a user inside the other instance so that you can connect it with ODBC, quite default. And then the first thing we do is actually we configure the server, and as soon as you test the connection, we're fetching all the tables which are on the other server available or readable with the user we're using to query. So we will get all those little tables here, as you see, Kronos AG. That's like the example database from Navision. So all the data are public. You can just download the database and you will have them. So it's nothing you may not see. And we just fetch them. And inside each object, we do store as well the fields, so that we have the main objects in all the fields, just with the very first initial fetch. With the default database, as you saw, it's 1,800 tables, and I don't know how many child fields. To set it up, it takes like 5 minutes, and then all the data are fetched and stored locally. So, furthermore, you need to know what do you get, or how do you get the information. So when we go to the SQL objects, you see in there that there are right now two main things configured to fetch. One are the employees, and the other one are the customers. But in real, when I open it up, there are many more information. So you see I have employees, departments, manager, REST partner employee, REST partner company, job title, and customer. So the main objects are the ones which are fetched, and those childs are taken as well into account. So that's like from the setup part. So when I go right now to the Navision, I don't know if you know how Navisions look like. It looks like that. Actually, I cannot make it bigger because it's a virtual machine. But you see in here are the employees. So I have Andrea Hirscher, Joachim Richter, and so on. And to be honest, it's not that nice. It's a bit ugly, but it's Navision. And when I open up an employee, you see I have a number, I have a title, I have first name, last name. Actually, very common fields we do have in Odoo as well. So there are all those information, and I do have a gender, female, and so on. I have a picture of the employee. So, and when I go back to Odoo, I will show you how it looks like inside our nice application. Hang on. And I open up the employees in Odoo, it looks like that. So it's exactly those employees which are inside the Navision. You see mail addresses in, there's the name and everything, as well the job title is in. And when I open up right now this Hirscher Andrea, you see, for instance, that she's female, which is actually right. But for testing, I can just show you briefly what is happening if I change her gender to male. Actually, it's a drop down, so let's go to male and say OK. And as soon as I'm in the virtual machine, he does not like the Mac buttons, which are actually quite logical. As soon as I go to the employee, she is still female, which is quite logical. And actually, I configured it like that in the background it should be updated quite often. So let's check it. Not running yet, so I fetch it manually. So when I go to the configuration I do have and say import objects, it's running quickly. You see it just took like a second or something like that. And when I refresh right now the page, you should see that she's male. So the data are really fetched live on the fly. So how do we get this information precisely? So when I go right now to this employee object itself, there starts actually the magic. So what we do is we say, how is it named, a logical name, what's the connection we are using, so you can as well connect to multiple databases with multiple SQL settings. You say what is the source module from the other database, or from Navision actually, and what is the target module, so it's the HR employee, and what's the key to identify the record. So due to the reason that the database, each database has a unique identifier, and the unique identifier needs to be known. So we store the unique identifier of the other database on our side, and due to that we can identify if we need to create a record or if we update an existing record, which is done on the fly, by the way. And then we do the mapping of all those fields, and the normal ones are easy, it's field by field, but there are one or two fields which are like quite special. One, for instance, the gender. So when I open up the gender, you see in here that I do a wrapping on the fly. That's actually what I noticed. So I say in here, specify values to be converted. So it's converted. And due to that, I say the source value is 1. So that's stored on the other side inside Navision as 1. That means 1 equals female, but in Odoo, the value is female. So I transfer or I convert the value on the fly so that it's properly stored, so that the object is properly created, very, very easily. And there's big magic behind this. You can even specify as destination value an eval function, so a Python eval function. You can declare the Python modules you need to run. So for instance, the pictures inside Navision are stored as zep, lib, BMP, base64 encoded pictures, which is quite weird. But Odoo stores them just as blob. So we need to convert them to a blob. So due to that, we can wrap just with one single line of code and the classes zlib and base64, the conversion of the image, and store the image inside Odoo as a blob. Very, very easy. It's done on the fly. And that brings really the big magic with this tool. And additionally to that, the line, which is as well quite interesting, is that one where nothing is applied. So I don't map anything with anything, but I have REST partner employee in here. So when I open up this line, it says there's a child object with a many-to-one relation, and that's actually the home address of the employee. So this information are stored inside Navision on the same object. It's everything on the employee. Street is on the employee and so on. In Odoo, it's in two different modules. So it's in REST partner and in HR employee. And it links together with a one-to-many. So we map it in here. And when I open up this like child object, which is a REST partner employee, you see in there is as well the same done. So I have again a mapping with those fields. I can reuse those fields multiple times. So like first name, last name, which are stored on REST partner and on the employee. So I have a double-side storing of those information. And I can specify as well like default values. Is it a company? So a field which is set when I create a customer by default. But actually, if it's an employee, I don't want to have it set, so I define it to false. It's not existing inside Navision because they don't have the logic. So due to that, we can store a lot of information inside Odoo with the Odoo logic and make sure that all the fields we need to have set that an object can be created is created on the fly. Same is actually with the job title, which is as well not that nice done inside Navision. In Navision, the job title is just a char, so a normal text field. You don't have a drop down, an object where you store the job titles. In Odoo, we do have. So what we do is actually to say what's the field to identify it. It's actually the whole char I take as unique key and say if the unique key exists, please create an object for me, which is called HR job. So I create objects, put in the name. So due to that, I have again Odoo logic and so on. So with the good knowledge of Odoo and a little bit help from someone who knows the other system really good, you can really create each type of object on the fly. So I want to show you one brief point. I want to create one new employee, just very, very quick inside Navision, and then we will fetch it again and it should be there. So when I go to new, I just say, give me a number of the employees, so it's a set which is done by. And now I say it's a CTO, for instance, and it's my name. And let's put in here. And let's say the zip is, and country would be Swiss. Actually, I guess that I didn't configure, to be honest, to fetch. And let's make a phone number just random, and it's male. So and say, okay, now it's created. And that should fetch the data quite fixed right now. So when I go back to the employees, you see there's already the CTO created in the background, because I have a scheduler running or a job running which will fetch the information all the time. So that's quite mighty. You see the job title CTO has been created, work phone has been created. So all the information are actually in. So you see my home address is set. And it's really an object, so I can go to that object as well. And there's the same information defined. So it's done. And I didn't click on the import button as I did it the first time. So when I go in here to this scheduler, you see actually it's, again, Odoo core logic. We just create a scheduler. And we just can define inside the arguments what import settings should be running. So you can say it's each night, you can say it's each minute, you can say it's once an hour or so on, because you might have static data which don't need to be live, and it might be that you have like real life data which needs to be live and stored properly. So that's actually the whole magic we created or we implemented. And I can tell you as well briefly what the scope or why did we have to do it inside the project. And the project was really, we're putting right now inside a big company, Odoo, so they use it for project management, and they need to schedule the employees properly inside the project management. But they use Navision for HR management, and they don't want to migrate in the first step to HR management because they are quite used to Navision right now, and due to that we need to have all the data. And that's exactly the use case, and it's running very good. It's a big database. There are like 500 employees, and there are no problems, and it's fetched. And what is happening if there are problems coming up? That's every time as well an important question. And we did it actually really in that way that we log right now. I mean, I just enabled it for the demonstration. We log really the SQL queries we are running. So due to that, you can trigger everything that has been done, even if you're setting it up the first time. As soon as it's properly running, you can configure that you don't log those things anymore. So actually, the next slides are just backup if the case that anything would have been broken. So actually, best practice I told you already. Actually, we want to put this app in the App Store. It's not yet in because we guess it's a mighty solution which might help for many projects, so we want to share it. Right now, we don't have any idea about the pricing, to be honest, because it's not released yet. There might be some bugs in, so if someone is interested in doing a beta test or so on, they can contact us. It's not a problem. And we can give you the code for beta testing and everything. The setup itself and the configuration, how to set up that logic is a little bit tricky. So you need to have deep knowledge. We created already tutorials for that and so on. But even though it's really something where you need to have some support, it's not that intuitive as it is. So it's, I mean, everybody can use it, but you need to have the logic understood once. So actually that was a short presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have questions, please feel free to ask any questions. Thank you. Yes.
Is the order important for the import? Like if you do an import, like the employee and the job title, you need to import the job title first before you can create the employee?
Well, the question is, just for the record, is there an order for the import so that it's properly working? Actually, no, there's not, because you define the main and the child, and if you have the main and the child properly configured, it will call the main, and if the main doesn't find the child, it will create the child on the fly. And you can do it over 1,000 levels, and you can do one-to-many, many-to-many, and many-to-one relations. Yes?
Will it work for Dynamics Exacta? Sort of condition. We have a project where we have to integrate accounting of Microsoft Dynamics AX.
Yeah.
So is it like similar, or?
As soon as you have access to the database itself with ODBC, so you need to have an ODBC readable user on database level. As soon as you have it, and if you have access to the database by VPN or direct, it's not a problem at all. Yes.
It only works in one direction, right?
Right now we have it just in one direction, so we just fetch data. In theory, you can write data as well. But with writing data, you need to pay a lot of attention, because if you just update a table of another database and you don't know the system logic, you may break a lot of things. So due to that, we have that in this project as well in one specific case. So we have one, let's say, communication table, and we store inside that communication table all the information we need to send. And inside Navision, they created a logic to work this communication table down. So actually it's like a job table where they get the information from us provided properly, and they can go through the table and say, okay, it's done, it's done, it's done, it's not done. So due to that, we don't write any logic in there, or we don't update any logic in there. But sure, if it's just changing a name and the name has not an impact, you could even update the name properly, but it needs to be clear to the user what is the leading system and what's the following system. Yes, sir. It's PyODBC in the background, and you need to install depending on the database, you need to install the right drivers. So for the record, the question was, is it, what was it, Linux ODBC or from the connector? No, it's PyODBC, so Spain. And then additionally to that, this version is Navision 2016, so actually quite new. And you have to use SQL Server version 13 driver for Debian. So it's everything available. You can even use Excel as data source, Access as data source, and so on. It's usable with each ODBC database as soon as you have the right drivers installed inside the machine. Yes?
In Odoo, you use ORM to create the objects in Odoo?
Yes. Yes. We do everything with URM.
Did you try to use, you said you tried to use the XML RPC interface at first, no?
Yes. The question is, did we try to use XML RPC? Yes, we tried it. The problem was that actually the customer said, no, we don't want to write for Navision a logic to send data to Odoo. So actually, it's not us who would need to use the XML RPC. It would be the Navision partner who would write something, and they said, no, we want to have it triggered from Odoo. So that's the reason why we fetched the data and we're not pushed. Yes?
You said just in time is also possible. Is it much harder? Because now you did it with an action, with a certain action?
Question is, just in time, is it harder to set up? Yeah, it is. Navision has a special mechanism to store changes. It's a change table in Navision. So it's database specific, and inside this change table, you have a reference to the source object. So first of all, you need to know what's the change table, what are the childs inside the change table, and then you need to trigger, depending on that, the right action. So to configure it, it's much more harder. but it's doable. I mean, we did it as well inside the project, but in the end, we didn't use it, to be honest, because with a fetch of 1 minute, it was enough.
But it depends on which database that you
Yeah,
use. So
and customer requirements and so on. Any more questions? Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice conference. See you.